How's it going, everybody? Stellar here today. We're going to be making a Xbox Series X. Just kind of wanted to have some fun with it, practice a little bit with some design, and also use a decent amount of hardops and boxcutter. Wanted to show you guys that it's really simple to make something like this. So we're going to jump right into that, but before we get into modeling, we're going to make sure our cube here is of the right shape, and to do so I was lucky enough to find this image here on Google with the measurement sizes, so we're going to go with that. So underneath our units here, we're going to make sure our length is measured in millimeters and not meters, and we'll go ahead and bring up the in menu, and while I'm here we'll go ahead and turn on my screencast keys, make sure they're enabled. We'll go to the item transform, and for our Z we're going to do 312, and for our X and Y we're going to do 157 millimeters. And so now we have the perfect size refrigerator for our Xbox here. Next step, I'm going to just go ahead and try to get this about the right size so we can get some of the holes to line up properly here. And that looks about like the right size to me, so we're going to go ahead and send it like that. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and just sharpen this, and we're going to throw on a very slight bevel just so we can see what we're doing, but we don't want it to be too crazy of a bevel. So next up, we're going to add the CD slot and the ejection button, so we'll go ahead and do that right now. Make sure our cube is selected, which it is. Go into box cutter here, and we're just going to make sure we're on cube, which we are. And I'm going to start about right here. It's got a bevel at the top and it looks like it tapered down towards the bottom here, so that's what we're going to try to recreate here today. Push that in a decent little bit. I'm going to grab these two top ones here and just give it a nice little bevel, maybe a little bit more of a bevel than that. Go. And I'll grab this edge here and just shoot it down to the ground. Go ahead and hide that and get it out of my face. And I just wanted this to basically be as close to what references I have pulled up as possible. I also have one off my screen as well. It's just a different angle of this, but I will be including all of the reference images in the link below, so if you guys want to follow along, you can definitely do that. Next up, I'm just going to select the circle here, and we're just going to draw it on really rough. It doesn't have to be crazy. I'll push it in, and we'll make it a slice instead. Now we're just going to make sure it's about the right size. Do something about like that. And that works for me. Go ahead and hide that. And we can go ahead and C-sharp this, as well as that. And I'm going to increase the bevel on this just a little bit and pull it outwards, just so it's protruding the surface a bit. Next up, what I'm going to do is grab this face here, and we're just going to do a curve extract. I'm going to hold shift when I click this so that way it does the plate extract, and we'll do it to about right there. I'll go ahead and apply the solidify to it. And we are going to do good old-fashioned blue box from view. We want it on box, and right there works for me. Next up, I'll just bevel that just to give it two segments, and we're going to grab this face and just pull it out a little bit. And we're going to take this face and just push it down, or that edge rather. Next up, we're going to inset this. This will be the area in which the discs are inserted to the game, or to the game system. And that looks pretty good to me. So now we have our little disc entry point and our ejection port there. Next up, we're going to do the USB port here. And we're just going to roughly draw it in. don't need it all the way through. Something about like that works. I'll go ahead and hide that. And we'll give that a good old sharpen. So here's the point where we get to do a little bit of cleanup, nothing too crazy. Do at last instead of at first. And we'll go ahead and do that up there. So we do have a little bit of craziness going on, but that's not too bad. So instead of doing that, I think I'm just going to run this to this edge here. We'll grab this edge here. My knife wants to not cooperate with me, like usual. Grab that edge and just go ahead and get rid of it. Get it out of our lives, we don't need it anymore. And we're just doing a little bit of cleanup so we can kind of get rid of the ugliness in which was created just there. I'm going to grab these edges here. We're just going to bevel it with one segment. I'm also going to go ahead and turn the bevel down too. We don't need such a drastic bevel. And we could possibly add a weighted normal, and that fixes those little shading issues there. Next up, I'm going to grab this face in here, and we're just going to do a plate extract on it. And just scooch it over and scooch it back. This is basically going to be the little USB thing inside the thing that does the thing. If that makes any sense to you, then congratulations, because it doesn't really make any sense to me. I'm not a very technical person. I just know it's the USB port, and that's what we're going to go with. Next up, we're going to draw in the little power button we have here. And I know it's hard to tell. It is directly above the USB port, according to my other sources here. And that looks about right. We'll go ahead and hide that and give that a good old sharpen and just pull it out just a bit and increase the bevel on it as well. Just something about like that. So that's looking pretty good. Go ahead and hide that because we don't need it in our faces anymore. Grab this edge and we're just going to inset it and extrude it downwards. Next up, what we're going to do is go to the hardops version here and just select circle for the grid here. And I've already got this set for my lasso. What you would do is just uncheck checker and increase the radius to where you're happy with it. I'm going to go ahead and scale that inwards a bit, just so we're matching with the inside of our little refrigerator we got going on here. I'm going to make sure it is just barely intersecting because we're going to do a union Boolean action. So I'm going to get this right up at the top here. It doesn't have to be precise because we can always adjust this in the very near future. Next up, add a solidify to it and a lattice modifier. I'll go ahead and grab my lattice here, and we can increase the count of the X. Do something about like that, and we'll try to do the same with the Y. Doesn't have to be precise. Next up, I'm going to go into edit mode for our lattice here and grab these two middle pieces. We're going to enable proportional editing and just push it downwards. About like so works for me. And in fact, we can go ahead and pull that up just a little bit because it doesn't have to be as drastic. If you look at reference images, it's nothing too terribly crazy. So I like it the way it is there. Go ahead and grab this here. I'm going to increase the thickness just a little bit. And we'll go ahead and apply that and the lattice transform. And we can get rid of the lattice here. Next up, I'm just going to Shift Q and do the union. Take a look and make sure we don't have any crazy geometry mess going on here. I can go ahead and hide that, and. and we're looking good. So next up, we're going to take this to the barber And just take a little bit off the top, make sure I'm in the right mode here. And basically I want this to be nice and flat. I don't want it to look like it has a seam going along the top, so try to get it to where the cutter's not doing too much, and that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and hide that and just C-sharp it. Just take a look at what we got, and it's looking pretty good. It's got that nice little divot in there, but it still looks pretty classic to me. So we're getting there. Next up, I know on some of the reference images there's a little stand that these things sit on, so I'm just going to add a cylinder and scale it down just so it's like a little flat disc. And we're just going to make that nice and thin. Go ahead and sharpen it just so it gets a nice color, or a nice shading for it, and then we'll give it a bevel as well, just so it can stand on something. You gotta have a nice swiveling refrigerator here. So next up, what we can do is add in the little cutout for where the logo is going to be, so we'll go ahead and do that here. I'll go with circle, enable X-ray view. We'll just draw a circle approximately the same size as the logo. It doesn't have to be crazy exact or anything. And I'm just going to go ahead and send that through since it seems to want to be lagging with me for some reason. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and pull this out so we don't have to have anything too crazy going on. We just want it to go in just enough, create a nice little cradle for the logo, and we're going to import the SVG of the logo so that way we can convert it into mesh. So we got that shape going there. We're looking pretty good so far, but real quick I'm going to load in some reference images of the back of the system here, and we'll go ahead and get that modeled in as well. Alright, now I've got my reference image loaded up for the back. We can go ahead and try to do the same thing. So it looks like there's a panel here. So we'll go ahead and make this back little paneling here. As we can tell, it's like its own separate panel. So what I'm going to do is just go to Object here, and we'll select the yellow box just to make life a little bit easier here. We'll start from this corner, and I'll just go ahead and push it in. I know it's not going to be exact, and we can go ahead and edit that shape as we go. So I'm going to push it on its Y just a little bit because it is too favoring of the left side. Disable proportional editing there because we don't need it anymore. And I'll go ahead and pull this all the way down to the bottom until I'm happy with it. Just a little bit more. And we can grab this top bit and go ahead and just push it to about right there. And that looks pretty good. So now we have this separate piece, which is really handy because it'll allow us to mirror it when we do these little shapes here. So what I think I'm going to do is I'll grab this face and we'll just pull it out just a little bit, give us some room to work with when we go to chop the face off to make it look a lot nicer. I'll go ahead and turn back to regular cut mode here, and we'll go into X-ray. And we want to just cut in a nice little square for these circles to rest in here in just a moment. Looks about right for me. We'll go ahead and push it in just a little bit. It doesn't have to be anything crazy because we're not going to be modeling all of the interior bits. That's just too much work and it's not needed for what we're doing today. And so those cuts look pretty good. I'll go ahead and sharpen that and see what we got going on with this shading issue. And it looks like some super easy fix here. I'll go ahead and get rid of that. Nothing too terribly crazy going on. Next up, I'm going to go back to the hardops menu here, And we'll add in another circle. We'll go ahead and scale that down and rotate it on the Y here by 90 degrees. And just try to get it into a good position because we're going to chop the rest of it off. And I know you could do the function of adding the circle grid into a cutter, but I would prefer to do it this way because we're doing a union function. So it's going to be slightly different than what we would normally do. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out on the X just so it's right up at the front. And we're pretty much doing the same thing we did on the top, but on the back this time. So now that I've got that there, we're going to go ahead and Shift Q and just union it. And with that still selected, I'm going to go back to boxcutter. And we're just going to chop off what's not needed so we don't make it mad on the other side there. Go ahead and send that through. And we can just grab this and scale it to where it becomes happy with what we're trying to do. Now I'm not entirely sure why the Solidify decided it wanted to become extra thick, but that works for me. We'll go ahead and push it inwards a bit because it seems to be getting grumpy with the bevel there, but that's not a big deal. We can easily fix that. Go ahead and hide that, and we'll sharpen this, C-sharp it. And we can kind of see what's going on here. Just some minor shading issues, not a big deal. In fact, we don't even need to do that because we're going to give it a haircut as well. And that's looking pretty good to me. Get it to the approximate shape we want, and I'll go ahead and hide that. And we'll C-sharp that. So we're looking pretty good now. We're going to add in this little inset bit for the little graphics and whatnot there. So we'll just draw on a box when we're on object mode here. And we'll bevel it. Nothing too crazy. We want it to try to match our reference as much as we can. And I'll go ahead and push it in just a slight bit. And we'll go ahead and make sure it matches the reference, which in this case it sure does not. But we can get it to be in the right position. Go ahead and adjust our bevel so it looks about right. Now I'll go ahead and pull it back a bit. Something about right there. That works pretty good. Next up, we're going to just cut into these ports. I'm not entirely sure what those plugs look like on the inside, but we're going to do our best to try to at least replicate at least the slots, because we're going to have some pretty moody lighting. We're not going to be getting any crazy close-ups or anything like that, so we'll go ahead and do that now. cut it right before this. Alright, now that we've got those added in, it looks pretty good from this distance here, so we're going to keep going. Just need to add one more thing, and I guess it's like a little lock position, so it's not going to be too terribly hard to do. So I'll go ahead and draw that in here. We'll just go ahead and send it through since I got a lot of active cutters or something going on causing the lag. And we'll just bring it to where it looks about right. I'll go ahead and hide that. Take this piece and we'll go ahead and C-sharp it. So we're looking pretty good. Next up I'm going to do is add in the logo, the SVG logo, and that's going to allow us to have some really quick mesh using an SVG image. So in order for us to get the Xbox logo in here, what we'll do is we'll go to File, Import, Scalable Vector Graphics SVG, then we'll navigate to where our image is and we'll go ahead and select it and click Import SVG, and it leaves us with something like this. So that looks pretty neat. It is adjustable as they are on a curve, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and select this and we'll just convert it to mesh. Next up I'm going to select all. We'll go to Mesh, Clean Up, Limited Dissolve, just so it leaves us with that. I'll increase the angle a bit just so we can get some better shape going here, and just to make it a little bit more smooth, and that looks a bit good. So the smaller the max angle, the better the graphics get, or the smoothness of the edges get. So next up, all we got to do is just extrude it downwards. We'll go ahead and get rid of the SVG material off of it. We'll go ahead and sharpen it just to give it a smooth shade, and we'll see what bevel looks like on it. And it's looking a bit insane, but not too bad. It could have been a lot worse, and I was honestly expecting a lot worse. So let's go through and see what we got going on here. So all it is just simple little overlapping. So I'll go ahead and do Mesh, Clean Up, Merge by Distance, and it got rid of some of those issues there. There we go. I'll go ahead and rotate this on the Z by 90 and rotate it on the Y by 90 just so we get this little shape going here. Next up I'm going to do origin to geometry just to make scaling a little bit easier. We'll go ahead and get this in its little respected spot. Something about like so works. And we'll put it in its new home. Now we got our little Xbox symbol on our Xbox refrigerator. Next up, all we got to do is just add some materials to it just to kind of get the idea across, really. So before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and add in a plane here. We'll go ahead and move it down just so it's touching our little disc thing here, sitting right on top of it. Scale that up a bit. And I'll grab this edge here, and we'll just extrude it straight up. Then we'll grab this edge, and we'll just add a nice little bevel to it. Kind of get like a studio render going on, and I'll stretch that out. And I'll go ahead and just not add a bevel to it, but just C-sharpen it, or sharpen it, just so we can get like a nice little smooth edge. Next up, what we need to do is we need to plan for our render position. So I kind of like this position right here. I'll go ahead and add in a camera, and we'll get it to about like that. And that looks pretty decent to me. I like the way that's looking. Next up, we'll go ahead and make sure you're saving periodically. I know 2.9 is a little bit older. There are newer versions, but you always want to save, especially if you're messing with experimental branches of Blender, because you never know, it might crash on you and leave you screwed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into Look Dev Plus here, and I just want to do the studio lights, and we'll just do EVHQ so it gives us nice shadows and all that good stuff. We'll go ahead and give this plane a material here. Give it a dark material, something about like that works. A little bit reflective, nothing too crazy. And we'll go ahead and grab our camera and just make it a little bit smaller, because it is all up in that Xbox's grill right there, and we don't want that. So now we're going to go to the shading tab here. Just press numpad /delete just so it'll bring it a little bit closer, and we'll press new here. So we're going to do a couple things. We're going to add in a bump node, plug the normal into the normal. We'll add in a noise texture. We'll plug the color into the height, or I'm sorry, the factor into the height. And we'll give this like a nice charcoal gray color, about like so. And we'll go ahead and increase the scale just so it gives us some sort of noise to work with, because we don't want like a perfectly shiny surface for this. So I'm going to increase the detail, and we'll go ahead and turn down the strength. We'll leave strength up, and we'll turn distance down. Now we'll mess with the strength here. I'm going to go ahead and copy this noise texture and go ahead and add another one to it. Just so it kind of breaks up the existing pattern just a little bit more. And we're kind of going for, I know it would be hard to tell on YouTube here, but I am adding kind of like a, basically you could call it like a grainy texture to the surface here, just so, you know, it breaks it up, it makes it not so plain and boring. So we'll do something about like this, and that'll work out pretty well. And we'll go ahead and turn down the color a bit. Something about like so works pretty well. Let's see what we're sitting like. We'll go back to the modeling here, and you can see it kind of reacts off the surface a little bit better. I'll increase the roughness just a little bit, and we can keep moving on. I'll go ahead and make this a darker but shinier type of material, so we'll decrease the roughness a bit just so it reflects light a little bit, makes it look a little bit more unique. We'll use that same material on our buttons here. I'll go ahead and turn up the roughness just a little bit. We don't want it too terribly shiny. We'll use that same material here. If you look at references and everything as far as the Xbox goes, you'll know they use like a really basic color scheme. And it's nothing against that company at all. It's just I've noticed that's what their color scheme is. It's nothing crazy off the wall, which is always good. Sometimes, you know, I quite like simplistic designs and shapes, and it's definitely good for shape study as well. And we're just kind of spicing up the back a little bit here. So the back looks good. It looks boring because it doesn't have all of those labels and everything, but I will make a decal specifically for that, and we'll go ahead and use a decal machine to add that in there. I'll also include a possible link to that decal as well, and I'll show a way to add the texture without having decal machine. You can import it as an image as plain, and that will work as well. So I guess the final step here is to give this a nice color, and we're going to go with silver. So we'll just go ahead and crank up the metallic, see what we're sitting like, and that looks pretty decent to me. So we've got our little Xbox. We are missing one thing though. We need to add in a light here. We'll add in a point light, scale it, or change the size once we get a moment here. About right there is good. We'll decrease the radius, probably push it down, and decrease the radius a little bit more. We don't need anything too crazy going on. I'll make that the nice Xbox green. We'll go ahead and turn down the watts as well. So now we got our little glow in there. We'll go ahead and grab this camera here, bring it upwards, and we'll rotate it on its native X just so we get like a good view going here. And we could honestly make the roughness of this floor go down just a little bit, kind of give us some of that dramatic reflection going on there. Next up, a final thing we could do, we can just go through, tick some bloom on, look at our ambient occlusion here, make sure that's pretty good. And we can go ahead and swap over to cycles after we go Alt-V, look Dev Plus, and I'll just press R to set this studio as our render. We'll go ahead and do look Dev Plus again. We'll just rotate it around until we get like a good lighting position. Something about like that works for me. And as a final step, what we can do is we can grab this, and we'll just grab these edges here, just the outer edges. And we're going to add just a slight little bevel to it, just so we can make it look a little bit more popping. You know, you want to have a decent amount of edge for the light to catch mostly, and that's looking pretty good. We got some good edge going. We might could actually get away with a little bit more of a bevel. We'll try something like that and just mark it. And that looks really good to me. There's some nice lighting going on. Final step, what we can do, go ahead and add in some lights after we make sure our cursor's at the world origin here. We'll go ahead and add some lights and see what that does for us here. I'll just rotate it around and just play with the lighting and see what we got going on. I quite like the green light. It kind of goes with the Xbox vibes. And we'll go down here to color management and we'll give it some high contrast just to kind of offset that a little bit. And a final good step, what we can do is add in another point light. And I'll go ahead and just move it over on the Y and up a bit, just so we can get some nice sideways lighting going on here. And we could take a look and see what we're looking like as far as renders go. I'll add at the end of the video some final renders for you guys to take a look at, as Cycles and Eevee are very different, but I can go ahead and go to GPU compute and we'll get kind of an idea of what we're looking like. But like I said, it's with YouTube it would be a little hard to tell. I'll add in the final renders at the end of the video for you guys to see. So that looks pretty good to me. We're good to go. We might need a little bit more lighting here and there, but for the most part it's looking pretty good. Add in just an area lamp and we'll rotate it along the Y and just pull it back and up a bit, and we'll rotate it along the Y just to kind of get it to look at the system a little bit better. Go ahead and change the color to something a little bit better just to give us some better reflections and everything, and we're looking pretty good. So I went ahead and made some of the little logos and stuff that go on the back and the power button and the eject button symbols with a photo editing program. So I'm going to go ahead and import those as images as planes. So I'm going to navigate to where I have them on my desktop here. I'm just going to go ahead and select all of them. And we'll just import images as planes. And that gave us all of our images. Now, I'm not entirely sure how well these would work in comparison to Decal Machine, but this is an option for those of you who do not have either of those. So we'll go ahead and have fun with this right now. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. It was a lot of fun to do, and it's just an eye into practicing cool stuff that you like to see. And I also wanted to show off how using boxcutter and hardops is really good at getting a really quick and satisfying result, especially when it comes to something as neat as, you know, a new games console or anything coming out here in the near future. So if you like the video, then definitely, you know, comment down below if you have any comments, questions, concerns, or emotional outbursts or anything of the such. Definitely let me know if you guys want to see anything in particular, if you have any other form of feedback. I love to see it as I read the comments. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.